Thank you, Steve. We've heard lots of stories today about how if you wanted to do something or said you could do something, Papa would commit you to that thing until you could do it. During the summer, me and Papa would go to lots of parades, and we'd see the unicyclers, the club, and I'd say, well, I bet I could do that. It doesn't look too hard. And so a couple days, maybe a week later, Papa says, Eli, go look in my trunk. And so I open it, and there's a brand new unicycle, and he says, you said you could do it. Go learn it. And so it took me a while, but I came back over, and I said, well, Papa, I can do it. And he watched, and he was very proud of me. Our next speaker coming up is Bill Wilson. Bill was an athlete of Larry's, a longtime friend, and Larry's better half on the soccer pitch. Together, they earned many state and national titles while coaching the famous St. Cloud Rollers soccer team. Please welcome Bill.
Hi, I'm not a speaker. I was a friend of Larry's for years. I guess maybe you start right. I got to know Larry. I was 14 years old, 9th grade, and in Fayette, I was in 3rd period Fayette, and we had a wrestling, and my weight, I won that. Well, the next day I was called down to the office, and this time I didn't even do anything. And Larry was there, and he said, your class has been switched. You had 3rd period Fayette, you now have 7th period Fayette, which is where the sports people went, and you're in wrestling. And I happen to know your dad doesn't pick you up until 5. You'll be doing that. I didn't know at the time that I had anything to say about that. That's where I started to know Larry. I also had Larry in geometry, and I would like to tell Pat that I did get a B. He said he didn't feel good couldn't feel right about giving me an A because the only thing that was on there right was my name. I do remember that. I remember walking into class, and one of the things he had a picture of a tree scratching his head, and it said, gee, I'm a tree. I knew Larry when he was younger. I was 14. Larry was 24, 25 at the time. And one of the stories that I wanted to share with you is when we were coming back from Osakas in a wrestling meet, and the bus broke down. And it was getting late at night, and I didn't want to wait for the wrecker to come. So I told Larry that I thought we could hitchhike home, myself and 2 other people. And he said, go ahead. And so we did. When I got back to school, I couldn't get in because it was all locked up, so we had to kind of jimmy a window to get in. Later on, when I would tell that story, Larry goes, you always get facts changed. He said, you guys snuck off and hitchhiked, and we were just worried sick of what was happening because we weren't on the bus. He was a character. I can also remember in geometry, a kid was screwing around, yelling out the window all the time, one of Larry's pet peeves, and we were up about 1.5 stories, and Larry walked over and grabbed him by the pants and threw him out. When he came back, he got detention for leaving the class. So I knew Larry when he was a character. I did learn some things from geometry. Not from geometry, actually I learned about leverage, but I didn't learn it from geometry, and I didn't learn it from wrestling. I actually learned about it because I couldn't make weight. And anybody knows anything about a scale, Larry was an artist with a scale. So because I was wrestling at 98 pounds, the little bar slides all the way to the end. Okay, so you're at 15, you slide it all the way to the end. So I got a lot of leverage out here. Well, Larry had put a little nut in the end of this thing, so when it came out to here, it helped me. When you slid it back to 0, it didn't do anything. So if it wouldn't have been for that, I wouldn't have made weight, because he stayed with me that night till late at night. It was obvious, like, you're not going to make it. The other thing, had I known that you didn't get to eat for 3 years, I probably wouldn't have went out. Larry said he had the only team with spider webs in their butt crack. touch with Larry for a couple of years, and then one day he was down at Wilson Park, and I stopped and chatted to him for a little while. And I was just doing beginning in soccer, and Larry was actually beginning in soccer too. And I wanted my kids to have the same benefits that I had gotten from Larry. So I asked him if my son could play with them. He said, "I got a better idea. Why don't you and your son both come? You coach with me, and Danny can play." So that's where my kids got to know Larry. I learned a lot from Larry. There was nobody that has more influence on my life than him, including my parents. I loved Larry. He taught me how not to quit. We used to practice, and no matter how miserable it was, Larry was always there. He would always say, "If you wonder if we have practice, call." Well, it didn't take long before you figured, don't bother, call. There's always going to be practice. It didn't matter how cold, how miserable, how bad the rain was. It would be me, Larry, and he used to get 2 practices mandatory and 1 that was optional. If 1 kid showed up, the practice was still 2 hours long. Larry said I would be here till 4 till 6. So Ryan never got out of anything, Danny never got out of anything, and Katie never got out of anything. So we had a lot more hours than anybody else on the field. But he would never quit, and even when it got so miserable rain, he would tell me, "This is our chance to get better," because he said nobody else would practice this around. And if you were miserable, Larry would make sure that he took his jacket off. So you'd be freezing and you'd think, this old man's got to be dying. He would never put that back on because he never wanted anybody to see that it was me. A huge influence in my life, like I say, he taught me never to quit. Okay. I didn't go on to college, but like I say, many of Larry's stories would make me stronger to keep going when you think it's going to be the end. Got to know the family years later. I can tell you one thing, that there's nothing truer than that song, but the wind beneath Larry's wings was fading. He wanted to make Faye proud of him. You're a special person, Faye. Your kids. You're a tough person to follow. Colleen, Ryan. And I won't tell you, I'm very thankful for knowing him. He's a great person. Thank you. Larry, I love you.
Thank you, Bill. Is Rachel